makes me want to have a bowl. So right, guys, we have the first headline up on screen there, which is the story that was coming from earlier in the week, last week, which was the story of Paul Lee, the man who was done for €4 worth of cannabis. Well, Paul Lee has managed to have his say in an article that came out there recently in the Sunday Times, and the article starts with this. It says, disabled father of four charged and taken to court after being caught with just €4 worth of cannabis has blasted Ireland's drugs laws as a complete joke. Paulie, who suffers with osteoporosis and is 54 years of age, who has multiple fractures in his spine and hip linked with the disease, uses cannabis to control his pain. And he's been blowing Bantry, and he says that he's lost 4 years of his life to a heroin addiction. And he says he's been terrified of using opiate-based drugs which have been prescribed to him for pain relief, as he says just half of one of those pills will turn me into a junkie again. And that's his own words there. Last week, the part-time chef and gardener found himself pleading guilty at the Bantry District Court to possession of the tiny amount of cannabis and a grinder too. He handed over a grinder containing the substance to the Gardaí when they raided his home on the outskirts of Bantry on July last year, which would have been 2020. He's 6 previous convictions, including 5 for possession of cannabis, and the most recent dating to 2016. And again, the most notable thing here of the case from last week was the comments from the judge in the case when the solicitor defending Paul had looked for leniency in that of the what was it, a donation to the court box, or community service. It was community service that Paul was looking for, and the judge said that I would not consider community service until I know he is clean, suggesting therefore that Paul Lee is unclean because of his cannabis use. But as we've just outlined there, he suffers from chronic pain, osteoporosis and multiple fractures to his spine and hip, which are linked to the osteoporosis. Cannabis is known to be an amazing pain reliever, and here again we have another issue, or another victim of the prohibition of cannabis, where a patient who should be able to get access to pain relief through health professionals, again has resorted to breaking the law and obtaining cannabis illegally, putting them then in the firing line of our peacekeepers, the Gardaí, the guys who were supposed to protect us. The Gardaí raided this man's home, and they found a tiny amount of cannabis in there, and they brought him to court for it. Absolutely appalling. Well, again, as I say, Paulie got to have his say in this, and he spoke with the Sunday World, and he told them that he said, I have osteoporosis at the moment, and I have between 5 and 7 fractures in my spine. He said, I have problems in my hip and possibly a blown disc too. It's a genetic disease. My grandmother had it. We've all had it. And I've been treated for it for the last 5 to 6 years in Bantry. I could be in a wheelchair in 3 to 5 years over it. I don't want to be, and I'm doing everything I can to stay mentally and physically strong. But it is continuous pain, and I'm in pain right now. Detailing the medication he has been prescribed to cope with his pain, he outlined how each day he's been prescribed 50 milligram slow release Plexia, 50 milligram Plexia. That's all morphine, and one Anzicam, Anxicam. Geez, I don't know how that's even pronounced. But Anxicalm, for anybody interested in it, which is the new word for Valium. He says, but I don't take any of that. I take a small amount of cannabis. And asked why he won't take the prescribed drugs, Paul says it would lead to him losing everything and everyone he loves. He says he came to Dublin in the late 80s to get away from his heroin addiction in England. He says, looking back now, that seems mad. There was more heroin in Dublin back then than there was in England. From 9 in the morning, there was young lads in the steps of Oliver Bond, the flat complex that he lived in, selling smack. And that was 32 years ago. But he did get off heroin when he came to Ireland, and he doesn't ever want to end up back on it. He says he spent 4 years as a teenager banging up heroin, and they gave me all this stuff for my pain. I mean, I was like, what I could have... I could have taken 20 of them at a time. He says, give me some alcohol and I'm off, baby. But I know even take half of one of those tablets and that's it, I'm gone. It was if I was on that stuff, you'd have called to me today and I wouldn't have a house. He says if I took all that morphine and Valium each day, do you honestly think I'd even be here able to talk to you like this? He says I'd be looking for smack in town or off in Cork or Dublin like all of the other people robbing and trying to get my next fix because of back pain. He says. Well, I'm going, not going back to that life. He says, Smack already took 4 years off my life. I'm a family man, for God's sake. I cook roast dinners every Sunday. He says, I have my children and my granddaughter. I haven't even seen yet because of COVID. He says, I've worked in this town for years and I know everyone and I have never given anyone any hassle. But effectively, I'm being criminalized because of my medical condition. He says, I can honestly stand up anywhere in front of anyone and say, I can't understand where I'm going wrong here. He says, I'm not saying to legalize cannabis for everyone across the board. He says, I'm not saying everyone should be sitting around and getting stoned or bombed on it. He says, as far as it goes with cannabis, legalize or at least decriminalize it for medical need. Stop arresting me and stop bringing me into court. All I'm asking is that the politicians and government exercise a little common sense. And asked what the reaction of local people had been to the publicity over his recent court appearance, Paul answered, I mean, it's an embarrassment. It is embarrassing that everyone knows I was a heroin addict. But at least people now know why I don't want to take all of that stuff that is being prescribed to me. If I took all of that stuff, he says, I'd be a zombie. It's time to change these laws. It's ridiculous. It's a joke, and I would happily go to prison to see them changed. What is the sense of making criminals out of people who are just trying to live? And there you go, guys. That's coming there from Paulie himself, and that was a recent article that he took part in the Sunday World. Someone has since been in touch with me who knows Paul Lee, and apparently Paul Lee is looking to get in touch with me. I've since sent him my number, and I'm waiting now for a call back from Paul, and hopefully I'll have him on the podcast at some stage to have a conversation with him, so he can share with you further his story and his journey as a person who's been looking to use cannabis medicinally, and has since bared the brunt of the law as a result of that. So, you know, I think it's absolutely appalling, and I know many of you out there agree with me. After sharing this story last week, I seen a massive outpour on social media with people kind of really lambasting the judge here and the authorities for even bringing the man to court for such a small amount of cannabis. It really highlights the need for a different approach to this. You know, people like Paul Lee getting caught up with the law when his only crime is he's a person who is sick and suffers with chronic pain. You know, Paul Lee's brought to court because of his cannabis use, but we have other people out there like Alicia Maher who have been exiled from Ireland because of our cannabis laws. Like Alicia Maher, who I had on the podcast just under a year ago now. She's in Alicante where she's getting cannabis for as little as €3 a gram, I think she is saying over there. And that's amazing, you know, €3 a gram she's able to get cannabis for over there. You know, I'm not too sure how much she would be using a day, but it really goes to show the possibilities that are out there. Should we have a regulated market here in Ireland, you know, the price that patients would have to pay for cannabis would be pennies. It's only so high because of the prohibition and the suffering that we've seen here in this case, and in the case of Alicia, it's all caused because of the current prohibition of cannabis, which has severely hindered the research going into cannabis and its therapeutic uses, thereby supporting then the prohibitionists and their argument that, look, there's not enough evidence to support the medical use of cannabis, therefore we have to keep it illegal. You know, it's complete bullshit. The UN there had an opportunity to remove cannabis from the Schedule 1, and they didn't. They kept it there, you know, thereby supporting the prohibitionists. They did remove it from the Schedule 4, which was the most extreme of them all, but they still left it in Schedule 1, which is the next most extreme of the schedules out there. So still we have a bit of way to go yet to make change here, but again, as I say, the people out there, you know, we will be the real catalyst to change here if we can really unite and build a massive movement of people rising up against this. As Paul says here in his article, he's willing to go to the prison to see change. We need more people with that conviction here in this, because that's the only threat here to put us in our place, is that the authorities will come and put us in prison. Well, feckin', like let's not be afraid of that. Do you know what I mean? They can't lock us all up. Let's remember that. Power in numbers, guys. United we stand and divided we fall, and it really is. That's what's going to get this together. So I look forward to getting Paul on, and hopefully over time, you know, people like Paul, more people like Paul will start coming out and sharing their stories, and being more vocal and more of a challenge to the authorities and the way in which they treat us. So I do look forward to that conversation, and hopefully I can bring it to you soon, guys. It makes me want to have a bowl.